Alright, welcome back to my video. In this video, we are going to go over Perlin noise and from Perlin noise generating a map. Now, what does that mean? I know I'm throwing a lot of words in the air all at once, but before we get into kind of explaining what that is, I want to go over this real quick, or take the time to go over and do it properly. None of this work is, well, essentially, none of this work is mine. I followed a tutorial to get this work done. Um, and what that means is that I am not taking credit for any, like, well, for basically the work put into this. I'm not taking credit for it. It's not my work, it's someone else's work. I was able to use tutorials for this assignment to get it done. Um, but I need to make the acknowledgement that this is not my work and that this is someone else's work that I managed to find and have since tried to use to basically help understand my comprehension of Perlin noise. And so, before I really get into this, to help make sure that the proper creator gets the proper amount of credit they deserve, I am going to make sure that I'm going to make sure that I put the link to the tutorial down in the description so that way if you like what you see here, go follow the tutorial. Um, and the reason why I consider credit so big is because in creative industries, credit is important. You know, you don't want people stealing your work. You don't want, right? Because your work is work. You know, it's what helps you get, money, helps you get attraction and everything. And if you don't have, if there's not much, if your credit's being stolen, that's work, that's money being stolen essentially. And so I'm going to make sure to preface by saying that this is not my work. This is not. I don't need the credit for this. But I will be linking the tutorial down in the description to make sure that the proper creator gets the proper amount of credit. Long disclaimer out of the way. Well, let's get into it. First off, before we begin, what are these values here off the side? What do they mean? Um, ugh. As Perlin noise is that it's noise. Now, what does noise mean? Well, you might have seen noise in, let's say, music or just noise in general. You might know that it works off of amplitudes and frequencies. And well, how does that? And then you might ask yourself, well, how does that contribute to making terrain or a map? Well, pretty much, let's step away from this whole thing entirely, and let's just focus on just think about amplitudes and frequency. Now, immediately when I say those two things, you might think of like the graph, seeing like the graph in your head where it has, let's say, these spikes on it. And now you might be starting to make the connection how those spikes in amplitude and frequency can turn into this terrain. Now obviously we don't see the terrain now. I will get into that. That's in a few moments. But I just want to explain what each of these values are. So essentially persistence is the amplitude, and now what that means is essentially the amount of basically the amount of octaves, the amount, and I'm going to get into octaves later, but the amount of like how much octaves contribute to the overall shape of the map. If you don't have much persistence, octaves won't contribute that much to the overall shape. They will still contribute, but what you'll find is that um, persistence wise, it will not be, let's say, as spiky. I'll put that word, be as spiky as, let's say, if there's a whole bunch of persistence, where you're going to see a lot of mountains, a lot of extremes, essentially. And then lactonarity is the frequency. Lactonarity determines basically how much detail in the map is going to be removed or added per octave. And now, time to get into the octaves. And the octaves essentially are, well, if you know what meshes are in video games or materials or basically the details of video, like the visual details, that they're made up of triangles, and what an octave is well, I guess I believe it's either a square or a triangle, and that just determines the mesh. That determines what it's gonna look like essentially. I guess a better definition. Trying to think here, better definition. That's man, yeah, yeah. I just had that really kind of sums it up there. It's like it's the level of detail, I guess, you want this noise to have. And then obviously you have scale and the map height. Scale, you know, it helps basically kind of zoom in or zoom out of the map. So if we have a lot of stuff, have a big scale, we're going to see a really kind of zoomed in picture, really zoomed in map. But if we don't have much scale, we're going to see a lot more essentially. We're going to see a lot more mountains, a lot more lakes, etc. And the map height, basically that helps give it a height. Not much really needs to be explained there. So let's play around with this a little bit, and I'm going to show off. So scale. Again, if we don't have any octaves, this scale value isn't going to do much. So let's give it a few octaves. Let's give about that much. Let's see. And now, as you can see, the octaves are octaving, I guess you could say, where now you can see that there are basically this mesh is generated. Now, as you can see, even though there's not much persistence or lactonarity, not much frequency or amplitude, um, we have these kind of like smoother shapes, not much like spikes, not many um, massive like extremes, I'll call them. When you have a lot of persistence, you'll begin to see this map turn into a really spiky terrain, essentially. A lot of extreme. I like to use the word extremes because pretty much the way I visualize it is that it's a map, and obviously in a map you might have an extreme height or an extreme depth. So that's why I get that word extreme. Let's play around with persistence a little bit. Let's see what happens if I hit that. Now, as you can see, sorry, throat's getting sore from the talking. As you can see, the shapes of, let's say, the mountains, the lakes, the grass, all becoming a lot more kind of defined because we're adding more persistence to the octaves. We're talking the octaves. Octaves, um, you know, the octaves essentially work in numbers. Let me break that down. Let's say hypothetically, as you can see here, there's deep water, shallow water, beach, grass, kind of a rock, shallow mountain, higher mountain, and snow on top of the mountain. What octaves work in is that when they get a value between, let's say in this simulation, it's 0 and 1. So you have immediately in my head it comes to 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, all the way up to 1. What that octave does is that it says, okay, if I get a value between 0 and 0.1, I'm deep water now. And when it gets to, let's say, 0.5, we're not going to see this deep water effect. We're going to see more of a grassy effect. And so that's, again, what the octaves generally contribute. And what persistence or amplitude does is, well, it determines how much each octave determines the overall shape. So as you can see, the shape of these mountains are being kind of become a little more defined. Now let's add some lactonarity in. Let's see here. And then lactonarity basically increases or decreases the detail of each octave, as we've covered. So as you can see, if we lower lactonarity again, see, as you can see with lactonarity, there's a lot more frequency wise, there's little details being added in essentially for each octave is now contributing to some more detail added throughout the map. And obviously with map height, we have the height being adjusted. Now as you can see, the map has risen up, As you can see, you now have these mountains. Now I am going to increase the mountain height. Like I'm going to increase the map height in the build and everything, so that way it looks a lot better. But as you can see, this is what it does. The, the this is what the map does. Now, let's kind of reflect on this. So I'm going to pause this real quick. So, let's zoom in here. In reflecting on this, as I've acknowledged before, this is none of my work. Do I, and that brings up the question, do I understand Perlin noise? I'm going to say not really. There's still much for me to learn about it. A lot of my, I had to do a lot of research, I had to do a bit more research, and I had to do quite a few tutorials before I really became comfortable before doing, I had to do a few tutorials before doing this video, because in doing a tutorial, it's essentially like you do it once, and you think you understand it, but you didn't really do it once. You followed someone else and just followed in their footsteps. I guess a good metaphor for this would be, let's say it's a snowstorm. Um, there's a whole bunch of snow everywhere, and you know you have let's say you're in a line with all your buddies and everything. The person at the front is basically the tutorial giver. They're doing all the work to make sure that they're pushing the snow to the ground, so that way everyone else behind them has basically an easier walk, essentially, because there's not much snow that they need. You know, the person at the front line needs to push down a lot more snow, needs to put in all that energy. Meanwhile, the person at the back, la 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 la, just kind of walks along. And now obviously the question then arises, well, what happened? You know, essentially in this case, I'm the person in the back, right? I already had the person do all the work for me. I just la 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 follow along. And so to try to make sure I am understanding, that I'm understanding that the person in front of me did all this work, you know, to make sure I'm walking easier and everything. You know, they're the one that pushing like the snow down, for example. Um, and to make sure I understand it, I myself, I can't just say, oh, I understand what it's like. Oh, I understand, you know, but because I don't, I've not done the work. I've not put in the work to get it done, kind of thing. And because of that, that's definitely contributed to my overall understanding of Perlin noise. Do I need to do more research on it? Yeah, I would like to do more research before I become fully comfortable to do it on my own. Um, and I guess that's what I kind of want to reflect on, is that for any students maybe going into this and just going in, not really going into this in particular, but going into this like programming in general, you can, I know in my last video in the proprietary algorithm, we talked a lot about how by following a tutorial, it's not really yours. You don't, you know, you have to go back to the tutorial, go to your work. Um, and that's the con of the tutorial, but the benefit of the tutorial can definitely be it's a lot easier to follow a tutorial, which is why when you start out, it's easier to, easier to follow the tutorial than to do it your own way, which is what kind of, I guess, sorry, a lot of junior programmers fall into that trap where, you're watching someone do it, you're not really doing it yourself, and then all of a sudden you think you understand it when in actuality you don't. So I guess my reflection would be, and my point to others would be to, you can follow a tutorial, but know that unless you've done it yourself, you can't claim ownership. You can't say that you understand it. I don't fully understand Perlin noise. I followed a tutorial on it. And if let's say you did it yourself, that's great. You've proven that you understand it. I still have a little bit to go before I've proven that I understand Perlin noise. Obviously, I understand what each value does. I understand, we've seen the video. I understand what octaves, persistence, lactinarity, map height, all that. but I've not done it myself. So as such, I don't understand it, right? Tutorials can be great to, help you get into what you're doing. They can give you basically a bit of a stepping stone to understanding something. But in actuality, you need to understand that in this industry, you don't really know it unless you do it, kind of thing. It's, so tutorials can be great. They can be a great thing to help someone who's maybe trying to start out, trying to feel their way. Um, but until that person does it by themselves, they don't really know, kind of thing. The tutorial, it doesn't it doesn't give you any errors. It doesn't tell you, oh, now stop, guys. Follow, solve this error, and then we'll continue. Um, it sort of just does that for you. It's like ChatGPT. You type in, write me a whole essay on oranges. ChatGPT will write you a whole essay on oranges. So anyway, tutorials can be good for beginners and to help people get a stepping stone. Um, and I guess my thing for like for future people is like, follow the tutorial, but take ownership. Know that you don't fully understand what's going on, right? Because if you run into an error, your first thought isn't, oh, I just have to go into the script and fix it. Your first thought is, let's go to the YouTube video. You know, you're not running into the problem. You're running to the YouTube video, and that's one thing that I guess I covered by proprietary algorithm is that if it's your own work, you go to the script. You don't go to the YouTube video because it's your own work. You don't why would you run to the YouTube video? And yeah, so that's my video. All right, see ya.